The Conquest of the Preventable. This world would be a delightful place to live in, if it were not for the people. They really cause all the trouble. Man's worst enemy is always man. He began to throw the responsibility of his transgressions on someone else in the Garden of Eden, and has been doing so ever since. The greater part of the pain, sorrow, and misery in life is purely a human invention, yet man, with cowardly irreverence, dares to throw the responsibility on God. It comes through breaking laws natural, physical, civic, mental, or moral. These are laws which man knows, but he disregards. He takes chances. He thinks he can dodge results in some way. But nature says, he who breaks, pays. There are no dead-letter laws on the divine statute books of life. When a man permits a torchlight procession to parade through a powder magazine, it is not courteous for him to refer to the subsequent explosion as one of the mysterious workings of Providence. 9/10 of the world's sorrow, misfortune, and unhappiness is preventable. The daily newspapers are the great chroniclers of the dominance of the unnecessary. Paragraph after paragraph, column after column, and page after page of the dark story, accidents, disasters, crime, scandal, human weakness, and sin, might be checked off with the word preventable. In each instance, were our information full enough, our analysis keen enough, we could trace each back to its cause, to the weakness or the wrong from which it emanated. Sometimes it is carelessness, inattention, neglect of duty, avarice, anger, jealousy, dissipation, betrayal of trust, selfishness, hypocrisy, revenge, dishonesty, any of 100 phases of the preventable. That which can be prevented should be prevented. It all rests with the individual. The preventable exists in 3 degrees. First, that which is due to the individual solely and directly. Second, that which he suffers through the wrongdoing of those around him, other individuals. Third, those instances wherein he is the unnecessary victim of the wrongs of society, the innocent legatee of the folly of humanity, and society is but the massing of thousands of individuals with the heritage of manners, customs, and laws they have received from the past. We sometimes feel heartsick and weary in facing failure, when the fortune that seemed almost in our fingers slips away because of the envy, malice, or treachery of someone else. We bow under the weight of a sorrow that makes all life grow dark and the star of hope fade from our vision. Or we meet some unnecessary misfortune with a dumb, helpless despair. It is all wrong, we say. It is cruel. It is unjust. Why is it permitted? And in the very intensity of our feeling, we half unconsciously repeat the words over and over again in monotonous iteration, as if in some way the very repetition might bring relief, might somehow soothe us. Yet in most instances it could be prevented. No suffering is caused in the world by right. Whatever sorrow there is that is preventable comes from inharmony or wrong of some kind. In the divine economy of the universe, most of the evil, pain, and suffering are unnecessary, even when overruled for good. And perhaps, if our knowledge were perfect, it would be seen that none is necessary, that all is preventable. The fault is mine, or yours, or the fault of the world. It is always an individual. The world itself is but the cohesive, united force of that thought, words, and deeds of millions who have lived or are living like you and me. By individuals has the great wrong that causes our preventable sorrow been built up. By individuals must it be weakened and transformed to right. And in this, too, it is to a great degree our fault. We care so little about rousing public sentiment of lashing it into activity unless it concerns us individually. The old Greek fable of Atlas, the African king, who supported the world on his shoulders, has a modern application. The individual as the Atlas upon whom the fate of the world rests today. Let each individual do his best, and the result is foreordained. It is but a matter of the unconquerable massing of the units. Let each individual bear his part as faithfully as though all responsibility rested on him. yet as calmly, as gently, and as unworried as though all the responsibility rested on others. Most accidents are preventable. As at Balaclava, someone has blundered. One of the great disasters of the 19th century was the Johnstown flood, where the bursting of a dam caused the loss of more than 6,000 lives. The flood was not a mere accident, it was a crime. A leaking dam, for more than a year known to be unsafe, known to be unable to withstand any increased pressure, stood at the head of the valley. Below it lay a chain of villages containing over 45,000 persons, in the direct line of the flood. When the heavy rains came, the weakened dam gave way. Had there been one individual, one member of the South Fork Fishing Club, brave enough to have done merely his duty, one member with the courage to so move his fellows and to stir up public action to make the barrier safe, over 6,000 murders could have been prevented. When a tired engineer, sleepy from overwork, can no longer cheat nature of her needed rest and, drowsing for a moment in his cab, fails to see the red light signal of danger or to heed the exploding of the warning torpedo, the wreck that follows is not chargeable to the Almighty. It is but an awful memorial of a railroad corporation's struggle to save $2. 1 ounce of prevention is worth 6 pounds of coroner's inquest. It is a crime to balance the safety and sacredness of human life in the scales with the petty savings that come from transforming a man into a mechanism and forgetting he has either a soul or a body. True, just, and wise labor laws are part of society's weapon for fighting the preventable. When a terrible fire makes a city desolate and a nation mourn, the investigation that follows usually shows that a little human foresight could have prevented it, or at least lessened the horror of it all. If chemicals or dynamite are stored in any building in excess of what wise legislation declares as safe, someone has been cruelly careless. Perhaps it is some inspector who has been disloyal to his trust by permitting bribes to chloroform his sense of duty. If the lack of fire escapes adds to its quota to the list of deaths, or if the avarice of the owner has made his building a fire trap, public feeling becomes intense. The newspapers are justly loud in their protests and in demands that the guilty ones be punished. If the laws already on the statute books do not cover the situation, we hear from day to day, new laws will be framed to make a reputation of the tragedy impossible. We are promised all kinds of reforms. The air seems filled with a spirit of regeneration. The mercury of public indignation rises to the point where fever heat seems a mild, inadequate term. Then, as the horror begins to fade, in the perspective of the past, men go quietly back to their own personal cares and duties, and the mighty wave of righteous protest that threatens so much dies in the gentle lapping on the shore. What has been all men's concern seems soon to concern no one. The tremendous energy of the authorities seems like the gesture of a drunken man that starts from his shoulder with a force that would almost fell an ox, but when it reaches the hand it has expended itself, and the hand drops listlessly in the air, with hardly power enough to disturb the serenity of a butterfly. There is always a little progress, a slight advance, and it is only the constant accumulation of these steps that is giving to the world greater dominion over the preventable. Constant vigilance is the price of the conquest of the preventable. We have no right to admit any wrong or evil in the world as necessary until we have exhausted every precaution that human wisdom can suggest to prevent it. When a man with a pistol in his right hand, clumsily covered with a suspicious-looking handkerchief, moved along in a line of people, and presenting his left hand to President McKinley, pressed his weapon to the breast of the chief executive of the American people, someone of the Secret Service men, paid by the nation to guard their ruler, should have watched so zealously that the tragedy would have been impossible. 2 presidents had already been sacrificed, but 20 years of immunity had brought a dreamy sense of security that lessened the vigilance. We should emulate the example of the insurance companies who decline certain risks that are extra hazardous. Poverty has no necessary place in life. It is a disease that results from the weakness, sin, and selfishness of humanity. Nature is boundless in her generosity. The world produces sufficient to give food, clothing, and comfort to every individual. Poverty is preventable. Poverty may result from the shiftlessness, idleness, intemperance, improvidence, lack of purpose, or evil doing of the individual himself. If the causes do not exist in the individual, they may be found in the second class, in the wrongdoing of those around him, in the oppression of labor by capital, in the grinding process by which corporations seek to crush the individual. The individual may be the victim of any of 1,000 phases of the wrong of others. The poverty caused by the third class, the weakness and injustice of human laws and human institutions, is also preventable. But to reach the cause requires time and united heroic efforts of all individuals. In the battle against poverty, those writers who seek to inflame the poor against the rich, to foment the discontent between labor and capital, do grievous wrong to both. What the world needs is to have the two brought closer together in the bonds of human brotherhood. The poor should learn more of the cares, responsibilities, unrecorded charities, and absorbing worries of the rich. The rich should learn more intimately the sorrows, privations, struggles, and despair of poverty. The world is learning the great truth that the best way to prevent crime is to study the sociologic conditions in which it flourishes, to seek to give each man a better chance of living his real life by removing, if possible, the elements that make wrong easy, and to him almost necessary, and by inspiring him to fight life's battles bravely with all the help others can give him. Science is cooperating with religion in striving to conquer the evil at the root instead of the evil manifest as crime in the fruit of the branches. It is so much wiser to prevent than to cure. To keep someone from being burned is so much better than inventing new poultices for unnecessary hurts. It is ever the little things that make up the sum of the human misery. All the wild animals of the world combined do but trifling damage when compared with the ravages of insect pests. The crimes of humanity, the sins that make us start back affrighted, do not cause as much sorrow and unhappiness in life as the multitude of little sins, of omission and commission, that the individual, and millions like him, must meet every day. They are not the evil deeds that the law can reach or punish. They are but the infamy of petty wrongs for which man can never be tried, until he stands with bowed head before the bar of justice of his own conscience. The bitter words of anger and reproach that rise so easily to our lips and give us a moment's fleeting satisfaction in thus venting our feelings may change the current of the whole life of someone near to us. The thoughtless speech, the revealing our lack of tact and sympathy, cannot be recalled and made nothing by the plea, "I didn't think." To sensitive souls, this is no justification. They feel that our hearts should be so filled with the instinct of love that our lips would need no tutor or guardian. Our unfulfilled duty may bring unhappiness and misery to hundreds. The dressmaker's bill that a rich woman may toss lightly aside as being an affair of no moment, to be settled at her serene pleasure, may bring sorrow, privation, or even failure to her debtor, and through her to a long chain of others. The result, if seen in all its stern reality, seems out of all proportion to the cause. There are places in the Alps where great masses of snow are so lightly poised that even the report of a gun might start a vibration that would dislodge an avalanche and send it on its death mission into the valley. The individual who would live his life to the best that within him must make each moment one of influence for good. He must set before him as one of his ideals, to be progressively realized in each day of his living. If I cannot accomplish great deeds in the world, I will do all the good I can by the faithful performance of the duties that come to my hand, and being ever ready for all opportunities, and I will consecrate myself to the conquest of the preventable. Let the individual say each day, as he rises new created to face a new life, "Today no one in the world shall suffer because I live. I will be kind, considerate, careful in thought and speech and act. I will seek to discover the element that weakens me as a power in the world, and that keeps me from living up to the fullness of my possibility. That weakness I will master today. I will conquer it at any cost." When any failure or sorrow comes to the individual, he should be glad if he can prove to himself that it was his fault, for then he has the remedy in his own hands. Lying, intrigue, jealousy are never remedies that can prevent an evil. They postpone it, merely to augment it. They are merely deferring payment of a debt which has to be met later, with compound interest. It is like trying to put out a fire by pouring kerosene on the flames. Jealousy in the beginning is but a thought. In the end, it may mean the gallows. Selfishness often assumes seemingly harmless guises, yet it is the foundation of the world's unhappiness. Disloyalty may seem to be a rare quality, but society is saturated with it. Judas acquired his reputation because of his proficiency in it. Sympathy, which should be the atmosphere of every individual life, is as rare as human charity. The world is suffering from an oversupply of unnecessary evils created by man. They should be luxuries, then man could dispense with them. The world needs societies formed of members pledged to the individual conquest of preventable pain and sorrow. The individual has no right that runs counter to the right of anyone else. There are no solo parts in the eternal music of life. Each must pour out his life in duo with every other. Every moment must be one of choice, of good or of evil. Which will the individual choose? His life will be his answer. Let him dedicate his life to making the world around him brighter, sweeter, and better, and by his conquest of the preventable pain and sorrow, he will day by day get fuller revelation of the glory of the possibilities of individual living, and come nearer and nearer to the realization of its ideals.